Welcome to Deserted. Each episode, we welcome a guest into the customs office. There, they must decide which 5 items they want to take with them onto the deserted island. 5 items, 1 island. This is Deserted. Joining me in the customs office this time is Chris Marshall. Chris runs CBRD, a wide-ranging website all about the British road network, which has taken up most of his free time for the last 16 years and proven surprisingly popular given its niche appeal. As well as photographing and writing about everything from surviving gas streetlights to the peculiarities of asset numbering on roadside equipment, he trawls archives and libraries to piece together untold stories about the things that have quietly shaped the way that we get around. He comes from Leeds originally, but has lived in London for the last 11 years, working in various technical roles to do with radio, and steadily losing his accent. Time will tell on that. A national newspaper once described him as not at all geeky. Chris Marshall, welcome to the Customs Office.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you here. You are going to be spending an indeterminable amount of time on a desert island, and you have 5 items to get past the customs office to take with you onto that island to help you while away the time and stay mentally healthy. They are a website, a podcast, a Twitter feed, a book, and a gadget or device. Not the usual things that you take to an island, but that's the premise of the programme. You can find the links to everything that Chris mentions at desertedpodcast.com/Chris or in your podcast app of choice. And we will see whether or not Customs Officer Matt approves with his stamp or disapproves with your choices. Chris, first of all then, what is your website that you're taking to the island?
My website, I've chosen London Reconnections, or londonreconnections.com if you prefer. It's not road-based. And I sat there and ummed and ahed about taking road-based websites, because I run a road-based website. Should I even take my own website? But that seemed a bit obvious. So, no, I chose London Reconnections, which does blogging of the most in-depth, at-length and forensic kind on transport in London and increasingly around the rest of the world. And it's fantastic. I get to indulge all the non-road side of my interests about railways and tube trains and Oyster card use on buses and things like that by going there.
Why did you decide to choose that one for your time on the desert island? Is it your favourite number 1 website, or you just thought it would bring something special to the island while you're away?
I don't think it's my favourite number 1 website. I think it will be one of the ones that I would miss if I didn't have access to websites to read them. Out of all the other things that I read, and I read a lot of stuff online, and I'm a member of forums and follow Twitter accounts and all that sort of thing to do with transport and roads news and, transport economics and all that sort of thing. London Reconnections is the one that I look at and I think, I wish my website was a bit more like this, because the long form thing that they do is they write about things from a position of such authority. It's effectively journalism, but about detailed things, or sometimes it's proper historical research, and they write about it at great length, and they write about it in detail, and they write about it with authority and with wit, and in this very sort of inclusive way that even if, I don't know anything at all about railway signalling, I come to it as a complete outsider, but they write, an extensive 3-piece article on the ins and outs of railway signalling on the Metropolitan line and what that's meant for, the service level over the years and how new trains will impact it when they're introduced next year. And it's fascinating, not because it's something that I know all about, but just because they write about it in such a way that something that I find sort of mildly diverting becomes a source of entertainment for an hour or so. And so when I relaunched my website earlier this year, I introduced blog posts, and my blog posts are quite long, and the articles that I write are long and detailed, and I have to confess that one of the reasons I did that was I looked at what I've been doing for the last 15 years, and I thought, this is all a bit 15 years ago. These guys are doing a really good job at reporting a different area of transport, but they're doing it in a way that is very now, if that's not too naff a phrase. They do it in a way that suits the internet today, and I was still sort of banging out static pages of HTML, and the articles were all a bit short, and I didn't put my sources down and all that sort of thing. They're really, really good at this stuff. They have an extensive archive that I can go back and enjoy while I'm on the island. I can go back and reread things I read 3 or 4 years ago and I've forgotten all about, and I can sit there and have that sort of strange mix that I always have when I read their site of sort of quiet admiration and a little sparkle of simmering envy in the background for the sort of the achievement they have created.
So this will probably become part of the whole theme of this particular podcast, in that, because your website, Chris's British Roads Database website.
Directory is
Directory.
the D. Yeah. There's no problem with getting it wrong. It's the world's worst name for a website.
That is about documenting things that you wouldn't imagine would ever be documented.
Yeah.
And so, in a way, that's why you're liking this website, because it's going into stuff that you'd never read about anywhere else. And it's also, because it's long form, it's going into the depth rather than it just being a factoid about something.
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
And so you appreciate someone else kind of going into a very niche-y area.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I mean, I've spent years, I say until early this year, my articles weren't very long and stuff. That's not quite true. I've written all sorts of long-form pieces. They don't tend to generate the stir that London Reconnections does. It doesn't pull in the audience that they do because more people like trains than like roads, unfortunately. I'm niche. They're not actually that niche. You can buy whole magazines on this sort of stuff. I've spent years going into, government archives and pulling out documents that haven't been looked at for 20 years and going through civil service memoranda and sifting through newspaper archives to pull out these things that I write, histories about, things that haven't been written about before, accounts of things that nobody else has ever thought to pull out and document. And some of it's really interesting, and it's quite nice to find other people out there who are doing it purely for the love of it, who are doing exactly that. I mean, I'm sure they do exactly the same thing behind the scenes. They are doing all this first-hand research for themselves, not because they want to be famous or even earn a living in journalism, just because they want to find out about the subject and share it with people.
They do run it on the side. It is not their real jobs.
No.
And I looked on the site, and they were on Patreon, which is a supporting website.
Yeah.
And they've got a fair few backers, and they get themselves $271 per month.
That's not bad.
From their backers, which isn't enough, they say, to make it break even.
Right.
I think they're needing quite a bit more to break even.
I think their hosting costs are enormous because of the hits that they run. I mean, but like me, they also, this is one of the other things I think commends them, and I acknowledge this from the outset. I say this from the position of someone who does the same thing and therefore fully approves of it. But they run their site with no advertising on it. It's all completely free. There's no paywalls. It just appears and you can enjoy it, and there's no cost to you. And sure, they have the Patreon thing so you can subscribe to it. Clearly, they don't quite get as much out of that as they hope, but they still just, it's just there for you to have. That's what I've always tried to do as well, because I think that's important. I think there might not be a market for these things, but there's still a value in finding them and sharing them. I think that's, I think noble is probably too smug a word to use, but there's something very worthwhile about that, I think. And I quite like going there and seeing it and supporting it just by, sharing it with other people and singing its praises.
They do release their own magazine called Overgrounded, I found on their site, every other month.
Yeah.
Do you subscribe?
I do subscribe. I think every other month is probably a bold claim for that one. I think I subscribed to the first 6 bi-monthly editions in possibly summer 2016, and I'm still waiting for number 6. Or was it summer 2015? I can't remember now. Yeah, they come out ever so slightly less than every 2 months,
okay.
But it is very good. It's not just stuff off the website. They do even more of the original journalism and stuff.
And they appeal to meet up for a drink every month.
Imagine.
Ever done that?
No, I haven't. That's always felt a bit too much like diving in with both feet. And I try and cling on to the fact that I am roads, I don't do railways. As much as I might read it and I'm interested, I'm not so geeky that I am that deep into 2 whole areas of transport enthusiasm. I think one is enough for anyone. Mm-hmm. And I do meetups with other roads people, you see. I don't think at this stage I'm ready to commit to that level of train and railway enthusiasm. I think that's a Pandora's box that I don't think I benefit from opening that one. But how amazing that they can pull together a crowd of, people like me who are a little bit afraid of daylight and other people and get them together in a pub and have them talk to each other. I mean, I know from meetups with other road people, we all turn up and have a go and things, but it's an effort to get to that point. So,
Right.
there's something there.
If you do support them on Patreon, one level means that you do get a free pint at these meetups, which has got to,
That's
again,
worth thinking about, isn't it?
Eat into their profits. So it's no wonder they're not sustaining themselves.
No wonder they're only just breaking even.
Exactly. Okay, it is an odd choice. You do have access to Wikipedia by default.
Yes.
So that should help you out with anything that you find on the island, eat it or don't eat it.
Yeah, you see, I thought I've got a reference source there, but also on the front page of Wikipedia, they cover today's news stories as well. So actually I thought, do you know what? I don't need to go too far down the route of what's happening in the wider world. I could probably scrape together enough of that from what Wikipedia seems to be doing. So I went somewhere else.
All right.
I might have a lot of time to pass on this island.
You might,
know.
yeah.
I might.
You might. I can't see it doing you any harm on the island, which is another thing as part of our care system here at the Customs Office. And you'll note it on the disclosure form that you'll have to sign at the end. So I can't imagine it doing you any harm. So I've got to approve it.
Oh, thank heavens.
It is in.
One thing in.
One thing in. Soon we'll be finding out the rather odd choice of Twitter feed from our guest, Chris. Which I've got written down here again, the why question. So we will find out what that is shortly. But first, what is it that you're going to stick into your ears or have come out of our musical coconut whilst you're on the island? What is your podcast choice?
This was another difficult one. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to them on the way to work. I listen to them on the way home. I listen to them in the car now. I've got my exciting new car radio I can plug my phone into. Podcasts go everywhere. So the question is not what shall I take, it's which one of them do I take? And I don't listen to music podcasts, so I couldn't really choose a music podcast because I'd just be picking something I don't normally listen to, and that seemed weird. So I sifted through my podcast subscriptions to choose one that I thought would bring me... I don't... What is the... Partly I'm choosing this blind, you see. I'm sort of hoping I'm going to get to this island and maybe there'll be some lovely white sand beaches, maybe there's some sort of shelter already there and I'm killing time. If I'm actually out there sort of hunting wild boar with a spear and spending every living moment trying to stay alive, maybe these are all terrible choices. But I've again done this because this is something that is both entertaining and it's also interesting, and I have to be interested in something. I have to have something to think about because I hate being bored. I've got to be busy all the time, and the next best thing to being busy is being interested. So I chose Radiolab, which is probably not a great surprise. You might even have had it before. It's a hugely popular podcast. It's American, made by WNYC, I think, in New York. Yep. Comes out of a radio show there. And it's sort of, nominally, I think it's supposed to be sort of exploring science and the world, but they kind of touch on anything and everything, really.
It calls itself a show about curiosity.
Yeah.
Which
I guess
that
it is,
sums it up?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, they almost pick a question in every episode and go out and find the answer. But it's not just the things that they decide to find out about that are amazing. I mean, they've covered things like the nature of silence. They went right back to the 1940s, I think, or the 1950s, and found the descendants of a woman who died of cancer in the late 1950s, from whom the initial cells were taken that are now used to grow and do tests for virtually every medicine we do. And so her death in the late 1950s allowed, they calculated, tens of millions of people to live by the medicines that were developed with her biological material. Things like that you would never even think you'd be interested in. And they find these stories and bring them to you in a way that's accessible and understandable. And because I work in radio, I'm also interested in the sort of the technical side of it, and the sound design in Radiolab is just incredible. The inventive ways they find to convey things, having music specially composed to illustrate something about the nature of cell division, or the nature of radioactivity as a sort of a sonic backdrop to a voiced explanation of something. You come away from it and it's not like listening to a radio program, it's like a whole experience. I mean, I guess in a way that is one way to sort of transport yourself away from the desert island. If you find yourself getting a little bit stir crazy there, it will take you somewhere else. You shut your eyes and you are just in this world that they create. It's amazing.
I'd certainly say that because it is a kind of American public radio type podcast, they do seem to be all over the place now in terms of podcasts. And I think certainly in the UK, because we've obviously got Radio 4 that do sciencey type programs and things like that, but the way in which they tell their stories is different from the way the BBC would say tell its stories. And I think that's what's kind of certainly woken people up to it in the UK is the sound design, as well as the way that they tell the story and the way they link in and out of the different interviews with people. Rather than saying their name, then they capture them off a bit of earlier tape where they're just taking their coats off and they're saying their name, or they're saying what they had. They
find
had for
a whole different way of doing things to the conventions that you're used to. I mean, when I was first put onto it, somebody recommended it to me. I wish I could remember who. And I downloaded one, and I was on the train to work listening to it, and I put it on, and within the first 5 minutes, it was the first time was just bewildering, because it's not like a radio program that you're used to, and they do this thing which I found intensely irritating for the first episode, but I'm used to it now, where they kind of speed the story up. So if they interview somebody, they will say, I spoke to so-and-so to find out about this, and then you'll have so-and-so's voice going and going, yeah, well, we were in Denver in 2015, and then they just fade it out, and the reporter comes back and goes, so they were in Denver, and then this thing happened, and it's just sort of a way of speeding the story up, and the other guy will come back a bit later, and I found myself sitting there on the train going, just let them talk. But it's the more you get into it, the more you find that it's quite ingeniously assembled to lead you through a story in a very rapid space of time and in a very engaging way, and often jumping between things very rapidly. It's not done how you expect it to be done, but it is really, really clever storytelling. It assembles a whole picture or an argument in your head in a way that just playing the interview on its own would never do. It's really clever stuff. I'm sort of a bit jealous of it as someone who works in radio. I found myself thinking, God, that's clever.
And I think also, because podcasts are mostly listened to with headphones on. Certainly in any research I've seen about podcasts, the way that they do they're very close up. And hello, and they're quite whispery.
Quite close in on Radiolab.
Exactly. And so that, in a way, is more intimate. And because you've got your ears on, it's not shouty. Because it doesn't need to be, because it's in your ears, it's in your head. And also, if you're doing it, certainly if you're working in London and you're on the tube and things like that, then you can close your eyes as well to really get into it if the sound design's there and it really take you off on an adventure. So I think it's good in terms of mental health, because if you do find that you are getting crazy and fed up with the constant bites from the midges and things like that, you can close your eyes, take yourself off. There's 15 seasons available, so plenty to listen to.
I haven't listened to the whole back catalogue, so there's plenty to entertain me.
We have no idea what the bandwidth is like in terms of it coming down, but it's not that long. They're not that long in terms of they're not rambling. So I think
I could download the first one, and after that I can just, download them in the background while I'm listening to them. That's fine. I'm not worried about that.
Okay. Radiolab. There's no restrictions on the choice of podcasts, so it doesn't break any rules here. I think I'm going to go with it. It's a very well-known podcast. It's very, very well listened to in the charts. So, thousands can't be wrong. So it's going in. Radiolab at radiolab.org from WNYC Studios is Chris's podcast choice. Links to all of these are in your podcast app of choice, or you can go along to the website, which is desertedpodcast.com/Chris. So then, the book we will go on to shortly, which again is transport related. You'll notice this thing.
Just about,
a mixture of radio and transport in this, which are Chris's favourite things. So this one is going to be a bit random, because it's neither transport nor is it radio.
This is going to take some explaining, isn't it?
So
I've got 2 out of 5 so far. I'm not convinced this one's going to go through as easy as the last 2 did, but we'll see.
I have the Twitter handle here, and it won't give you any clues if I tell you what it is. It is at TMBOTG. STG. Chris, what is it?
This is a really off the wall thing, because for a start, it's not even a person; it's a bot. Hence the BOT in the Twitter handle. So it's not even a real person talking about things. It is an automated bot that just churns out tweets every so often, and it publishes random extracts from lyrics of songs by They Might Be Giants, the American band. Hence TMB OTG is They Might Be Giants, but with bot inserted in it. So I should probably explain why I've chosen this. Is that your...
Yes, please.
Right, okay. So I'm picturing myself on this desert island, and I'm thinking about what I will have available to me. And it is important to have music. I like having music in my life, and I like all sorts of different kinds of music. And I thought about how I might be able to listen to music on the island. And the problem that I've got is that I won't be able to take anything with me on which I can listen to music. Maybe I could have sorted that out with a gadget, but I will come on to that later. I don't believe, having looked through the small print, there's no radio I can listen to on the island. There doesn't seem to be some sort of, house band there. So I've got a real problem with finding some music to listen to. And as I said, the podcasts I listen to, none of them are music-based, so I couldn't bring a music-based podcast. So I've got a real shortage of music here. So I tried to think laterally about this, and I was going through the Twitter feeds that I follow, and I was having real trouble with choosing a Twitter feed. And in the end, I found the solution to both those problems in one, because I couldn't find a single Twitter feed that I would want to take on its own in isolation that would be of any value. And in the end, I alighted on this. If I can't take music with me, Matt, I will take the lyrics of my favourite band with me, and I will just sing them to myself. And as the tweets come through, they will remind me of all the songs that I know, and I will think, oh, that's a good one, and I can walk around the beautiful white sand of the island, humming the tunes for myself with my memory prompted. That is the plan.
Okay. I was going to ask whether or not you actually liked the music of They Might Be Giants.
Yeah, they are my absolute favourite band. I'm slightly obsessive about them. So I know a lot of, they've got a huge back catalogue. They've got something like 17 or 18 studio albums now. And this just churns out a random few lines from a random song from somewhere and all of that. But I thought that is a more or less endless source of music that I know I always enjoy, and I can sing most of it or hum most of it for myself. Nobody else wants to hear my singing. It's awful. But if there's only me, that doesn't matter, does it?
No.
So that's fine.
And it might help repel things as well.
If there's any vicious wild animals on the island, the sound of me singing would probably
be enough.
Probably see them off before they get too close.
So when it went through the customs office computer, we had a look at the regularity of tweets.
Yes.
It seems to be roughly 8 to 10 tweets a day. It can be.
Yeah.
So you're going to have enough material, aren't you? To
I think
keep going.
So. It's like when you get a song stuck in your head. One song stuck in your head will keep going around your head all day long. 8 to 10 songs in a day. It's quite varied. That's like listening to an album in a day.
Have you had any repeats?
Of the songs they come out with? Yeah, I think I've seen the same lyrics come around once or twice. But they've got so much to go from. It is random, so the same one could come round. No, I think I'll be fine. I'm not worried about that.
Okay.
This is an uphill case to convince you of the merits of this particular choice. I'm feeling that. I expected that, in fact, walking in here.
Yeah, what I'm concerned about is if you imagine your choices as a diet. What I'm concerned about is that maybe this is all just too much protein and not enough fibre and things.
Right, okay.
So I'm, individually, these items, they're absolutely fine and would be approved all day long. I'm just thinking that when it comes to going through the door, whether the collection of stuff that you've got is going to be okay for you. You
see, I'm having trouble seeing how I could have chosen a Twitter account that would have, for example, helped me set up an irrigation system to start growing my own crops for survival purposes, or that I could have hollowed out to make a canoe and go fishing, for example.
Doesn't Bear Grylls talk about that?
What, hollowing out a Twitter account to turn into a canoe? Well, maybe he does. Maybe I should follow Bear Grylls, but I don't currently follow him.
Right.
So I can't vouch for the survival tips that he tweets out.
Okay.
And my fear is when you say that this is the wrong diet of things, my fear is that perhaps I have been set up from the start here, because none of the things that I regularly read or listen to are geared up to help me survive in a wild environment, because that's just not the life that I live.
Okay.
So maybe when I go rifling through my wardrobe to find a machete and a packet of coconut seeds that I can take out with me, you don't even have seeds, they're nuts, but you know what I mean, then maybe the cupboard is bare for that sort of stuff, and that is why I turn up here offering you an automated Twitter account that churns out lyrics.
All right. So
What could I do given the resources I have?
we're gonna go with approved, and we are gonna have to save the question for the end. So we're going with approved on the Twitter feed.
Thank you very much.
TMBotG. TMBOTG. It's a Twitter bot tweeting random chunks of They Might Be Giants lyrics. Is Chris's choice to get him through the days and days or day that he will spend on the island. Right, gadget or device is not going to help your survival. We will deal with that in moments. Let's figure out the book. So it could be a printed book or an ebook, but not a periodical. So you couldn't have those magazines that come through.
There's only 5 of them so far, so they never stood a chance.
This book, from our research, seems to be hardcover only, not available in electronic
Quite possibly,
form.
yeah.
What is your book?
It's the Z to Z of Great Britain by Dixie Wills.
So this caused a lot of amusement in the office today as we went through it, and we found
Did you find a copy to read?
we came very close to buying a copy.
Wow.
The paragraph of information I've got to distill to you, dear listener, is from Zorn Organ, Cornwall, to Zor in Shetland via Zion Place in Somerset and Zulu Farm, Oxfordshire. The Z to Z of Great Britain provides an essential profile of each and every Z locale in the land and, thoughtfully, instructions on how to get there.
Yes.
Would you say that sums it up?
That does sum it up, yeah. That's exactly what it is and what it does.
Why are you taking it to the island of Zulu? Or whatever you want to call it.
No, we should give it a name beginning with a Z. That would be entirely appropriate. When I had to choose a book to take with me, my mind went straight to this one for the very simple reason that it is possibly my favourite book. I read quite a lot, and I've got bookshelves full of stuff. I like having books and buying books and reading them, and I like keeping them when I've read them on my book. So picking a favourite is tricky, but this is the one that I've come back to more often than any of the others. There is no substance to it. Well, no, that's probably not fair. I shouldn't say that. But it's not like taking War and Peace and going on this terrific sort of, soul-changing journey led by some of, one of the world's greatest narrators. It's not that sort of book, but it brings me such great pleasure. I don't know how long my stay on the island is going to be, but I have never yet tired of picking this book up and reading a bit of it. It just does the job for me every time. It's wonderful in the lightest and silliest and most comforting of ways. So it's not precisely what it claims itself to be, because it is a guide to all the places in the UK that begin with a Z, and there are quite a few of them, but a limited number. But it's a guide to all of those places, and the conceit of it is that it is written like a travel guide, like a sort of AA best hotels or something. But it's written in the absolute certain knowledge that you, the reader, will be travelling to each and every single one of them. You will be going. You need to know everything about them because you're not going to miss a single one out. It is fairly certain that you're going to be going by tricycle a lot of the time. It's insistent on telling you what they will and will not collect on the green bins in each location. And half the places it goes are just sort of a piece of rock sticking out of the sea just off the Cornish coast or something. Some uninhabited lump of something that has an ancient pagan name, or a farm in the middle of Somerset or something. And it sounds like it could be absolutely nothing to read at all, but I've got a number of books by Dixie Wills. In fact, I went to a couple of his book launches a few years ago, so I have met him a couple of times as well. And he is so skilled in weaving something out of nothing. And so you read this thing and there is absolutely nothing to write about any of these places. And so, of course, it's not really about whatever there is there at all. It's just about whatever else might have caught his attention. There's one where there just happens to be an orange lifebuoy lying on the beach, and it turns into I think it's the buoy of significance, and it describes the effect this thing will have on your life and its activities at high tides and its significance in history and all this sort of thing. Or it describes for a lot of them the role they played in the Civil War and things like this. And it's so light and so silly, and I prize silliness very highly. I think we need more silliness in the world. It's harmless and it's fun and it lifts your spirits, and that is precisely what this book does every time I pick it up. It's just a world of joy from start to finish.
Okay. The other books that we saw include other ones by Dixie Wills are Tiny Islands, 60 Remarkable Little Worlds Around Britain, Tiny Stations, and this one which sounded intriguing called At Night, A Journey Round Britain from Dusk Till Dawn.
I haven't seen At Night. I've read the other two. Tiny Islands is an actual... it's contrary to the Z to Z, it's a genuine guide where you can go and stay on islands, and it's an actual travel guide. Tiny Stations is one I went to the book launch for, and embarrassingly, he put the details of his book launch on Twitter and said, if anyone would like to come along, let me know. And so I went, I'll come along. And I took an entourage of myself and two other friends, and we were the only people there who weren't either him, his family, or someone to do with the publisher.
Oh.
And he ran a sort of pub quiz at the event, which we won. And so we took away this wealth of prizes and a sort of a vase that he had modified to include the Tiny Stations book cover on it, which I still have at home, and I put flowers in from time to time. So Tiny Stations is the one where I more or less gate-crashed his book launch and then took away all the things he'd brought. No, Tiny Stations I would also highly recommend. It's a load of request stops where you have to stick your hand out to make the train stop. And sometimes he spends anything up to a day in them, and it's exactly the same thing of just weaving something out of absolutely nothing. And it's a joy. I would recommend any of them, but the Z to Z of Great Britain is my pick.
I think it's a great pick.
This is interesting. When you were concerned I wasn't getting enough fibre earlier, I'm not sure this is any more serious or more survival related than anything else. Why do I get stick for the other ones, but this one's a shoo-in?
I've given up your diet because I'm not sure.
Is my survival a write-off? Is that where you go?
I'm not sure you're going to spend much time on the island. So I at least...
Does that mean I'm leaving, or do you just mean I'm not going to go the distance and I'm going to be collapsed on a beach? I think
you are going onto this island and you will just be completely oblivious to the situation that you find yourself in.
That's my plan.
You'll be in your own merry world, and then something's going to... I don't know, a coconut's going to fall from a tree, knock you out, and that'll be it.
I don't do well in the wilderness. I need my creature comforts, and if I can't have them, I need distracting from the fact that there's no nice duvet and radiator and all the other lovely things at home. So, yeah, that's more or less my plan, I think.
So I'm going with approved. I can't say it's disapproved. It will be interesting and will make you laugh for the time that you'll get to read it. So that is approved, a stamp on the book. So then...
For the time that I'll get to read it feels a bit ominous, but thank you.
This is your time to now redeem yourself in the eye of the audience.
Yes.
With a very practical gadget or device. It cannot be a computer, a mobile phone, or other broadcast communications or internet access device. What is it going to be?
Well, those rules are the problem, you see.
Yeah.
So I look at the list of things I'm allowed to bring onto the island, my list of 5 things, and try and work out what they're all going to be. And you tell me that my gadget or device can't be, effectively, it can't be a computer and it can't be a phone, it can't be some method of communication. So as far as I can tell, I can't take a radio with me. That's not going to work. I can't take my computer with me. And the problem I've got is that I used to have all sorts of little gadgets and things that might have been handy or useful. I might have had a compass that I could take with me, or I could have had, I don't know, all sorts. I could have taken a camera with me and practiced my photography on the island. Mm-hmm. All of those things have been replaced by my phone. because that's what phones do now. And I find myself looking around my life trying to find a gadget, and I find nothing that would be of the remotest use on a desert island. I mean, maybe you're thinking, take your Swiss Army knife. I haven't got do I look like a man with a Swiss Army knife? So I have no gadgets that I'm allowed to take with me that would be of the remotest use. I can't think of one that I could take that would be of any use. So I have chosen one that will be of no use whatsoever, but will still bring me great joy to have with me.
Okay.
And it will perform its task equally well on a desert island, just as it does at home. So there is no diminution in the level of service when I take it away and it gets sand inside its components or whatever, because it doesn't do anything anyway.
So, I'm looking at it now.
Yes,
and
I brought it with me.
It's taking up the whole of Bob's chair.
Yes.
It's that big.
It's this big, it's here.
I can see it's of some electronic or former electronic use.
Yeah, it was at some stage. It is a PA8/378/104 source selection module.
What,
you ever used one of those
tomato, salad cream, mayonnaise?
No. Source as in the source of something, as in the something you might pick up, a source for a book or for some research or something. In this case, it is a modular component of a long since decommissioned audio mixing desk,
right?
Of a type that I used to use in a former life.
Okay.
So many years ago, I worked for the BBC World Service mixing radio programmes back in the days when they were based at a building called Bush House in central London, which was, in those days, in its last 4 or 5 years before they decommissioned the building and moved elsewhere, was a bit like working in a museum of ancient audio equipment, because they knew they were leaving the building. There was no point replacing anything. There was very little point spending any money on things. You would find that if something broke, they would just sort of put a neat label on it that said broken, and that would be that until the move-out date, for years in advance. And so we were still using things in that building which would have been considered a bit old hat for a museum exhibit in some cases. And one of the things that we used to use were a type of mixing desk that was so old it had been designed and built by the BBC in-house, so not bought from some manufacturer, but screwed together by men smoking pipes in brown coats in some workshop somewhere in a BBC building to their own specification. And these things looked like they'd been made out of recycled battleships just after the war. They were all sort of gunmetal grey and clunky bits of hardware, and the front of them had a sort of a wooden front on it that would all be kind of flaking away because it was so old, with hazard tape covering the splinters and things like that. But for all their age and their decrepitness, they were some of the loveliest bits of audio equipment I've ever worked on, because they did precisely the thing they were meant to do and nothing else. And everything was so close at hand. And the best thing of all about them was, in an era where we have iPhones and touchscreen technology, and your Sky remote at home has a little pad on it, and you talk to the your Alexa or whatever, and technology now is so seamless as to be almost just like waving your hands in the air, like Tom Cruise in Minority Report. These mixing desks came from an era when technology was tactile, when you pressed a button and it went clunk, and you could be damn sure you would press the button because you felt it move and you could hear it. And I love technology of that era. I sort of miss the fact that there is nothing much in my life now that makes such a satisfying sound as some of the things on these bits of kit did. So when the building was decommissioned, I found this on eBay for £10, and I thought, well, I'm having that. And it sits on my desk, completely disconnected from anything else it would ever have been connected to. It is never going to do anything else again. In fact, if you look at the back of it, it did come with a great big wedge of cables coming out of it, which I've unceremoniously sawn off because I'm never going to plug it into anything. And they added about a ton to the overall weight of the thing. And it's just this lovely selection of knobs and controls and dials that have no purpose. But when I'm sitting at my desk trying to write an original long-form article about something that nobody else in the world has ever thought to write about, and I'm suffering writer's block, I can just sit here and twiddle some knobs and press some buttons, and it's nicely distracting. So would you like me to take you through it before we discuss its merits? I think you need to understand the merits of this.
Do some twiddling.
Okay.
And some clicking, maybe.
Okay, all right. So we have... I'll start off at the bottom end here. We have 5 of these lovely switches here. They're white and triangular, and they latch up there and they click down in that direction.
A bit like a Morse code
and then
oscillating
spring back
machine.
out. Yeah, a little bit like that. You could sort of tap out messages, or you can flick them up and they just latch nicely and sort of satisfyingly up there. They're very pleasing. And then there's a row of 5 of these dials, and these have 3 positions, and they have the most almighty clunk to switch between positions. You can switch them twice at once as well. They're very satisfying. And then the top are a set of rotary dials with, gosh knows, about 20 positions on them, which would have selected the incoming audio source to your fader, hence a source selection module. And these spin freely with the most lovely... I mean, you can't feel this on a podcast, obviously, but it drops into place for each of these positions as you turn it in the most pleasing of ways. I mean, I would encourage you to have a go yourself and see what you think the feel of it.
The top knobs there that you're twiddling remind me of the game Countdown, I think it was called, where you had red and yellow little round.
Was this like
counters.
A board game?
Well, it was upright, a bit like kind of you would play Battleships or something, and you had to bring the red and yellow bits down by twisting. So it kind of had a little claw, and you twisted it round, and then a little pellet would turn, and then you'd move it around again.
Like that. Yes, I remember that.
And you'd move it around again.
Yeah.
That's what they remind me of in terms of the thing coming out to enable you to twist it round.
Yeah. Except that would enable you to have a little thing drop into it and you could turn it and then it would fall out, whereas these do literally nothing now.
They do nothing now.
Nothing at all. They just turn pleasingly.
I suppose if I was to be cruel, which sometimes the customs officer is, the thing that sprung to mind was a very large fidget cube.
Yes, it is a bit, yeah. That's the purpose it has on my desk now.
That's what it's doing for you, is it's giving you something to do to potentially take your mind off things while you're trying to come up with something to write.
You'll see the theme here that I've basically picked 5 things that will take my mind off the fact that some cruel person has marooned me on a desert island where I won't know how to fend for myself and I'm probably just going to perish in the most awful of circumstances. So what I really need here are some distractions, and this always sort of distracts me and takes my mind off things in a productive and helpful way. I mean, for something that does nothing, it does me an awful lot of good.
Good. Well, we had the diet episode halfway through, and since then I've just given up. So I'm going with approved. I've got a question here, but I know the answer because it's not going to help you on the island at all, apart from taking your mind off things.
I mean, actually, it's fairly sizable. It's made out of some fairly big lumps of metal. I could whack something over the head with it. It's got sharp corners and some weight to it. I mean, I could use it as a blunt instrument in extremis.
Okay. So we're going with approved. It's probably one of the weirdest things that we've ever allowed onto the island. A channel source selector module from a DK419 audio mixing desk. I don't know what the chief is going to think of that when I put the form through, but hey, we will just have to stick it through. So they are Chris's choices at desertedpodcast.com/Chris or your podcast app of choice. There won't be an Amazon link to that channel source selector module because it's not made anymore.
No, you'll have trouble getting hold of one.
I think I know the answer to this. Do you think you're going to enjoy your time on the island?
Well, it depends what the island is like, and what I find disappointingly lacking about going into this process and being deposited on this island, as nice as experience as it is sitting here and talking to you as I go through customs, is that there is very little information that prepares me for what the island is going to be like when I get there. So it sort of depends on what I find when I go through the door and step out onto this island on my own. So if I go out there and let's say there is this lovely white, and this is what I'm hoping for, lovely white sand beach, there's palm trees, perhaps some previous inhabitant has set up some nice kind of shelter on the beach made out of driftwood, maybe it's got a hot tub and a balcony and a deck chair, maybe there's a plentiful supply of coconuts and fruit on the trees to eat. then I'm going to be really happy. I can sit there and drink my coconut milk, and I can read my website and my book, and I can sing my songs and listen to my podcasts and click all my dials around, and everything's going to be really... I'm going to have a great time. When you turn up and go, right, time's up, but, you better go, I'm probably not going to want to leave. If, on the other hand, I step out there and it is the full Bear Grylls experience, there are wild animals making terrifying noises in the jungle all night long, there's nowhere to shelter, the monsoon rains are coming, there don't appear to be any sources of food, and if I want to eat anything, I have to kill it first, then I'm probably just going to be mildly distracted from a state of hysteria by these 5 objects before I meet my terrible end. So it depends very heavily, really, on what's through that door. And that's what's going through my mind at this stage as we come to the end of my time in this well-built, fortified building, and I find myself wondering what environment I'm going to be in next. I'm hoping for the former, in which case it's going to be lovely, Matt. Okay. It's going to be like a big, long, extended holiday, and I'll be very happy indeed.
Right. Well, let's hope that that's the case.
I'm hoping so.
Thank you ever so much for agreeing to come through the customs office, and I do hope you do enjoy your stay.
It's been a pleasure so far, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Deserted. To listen to previous episodes, either subscribe in Apple Podcasts, your podcast app of choice, or head to desertedpodcast.com. Please leave a review on iTunes, and if you want to send a message in a bottle with feedback, or you would like to be on a future episode, send it to customs@desertedpodcast.com.